All right, more phone calls coming up. We make way for Tim Kurkjian, ESPN analyst and National Baseball Hall of Fame sports writer. He's Little League World Series, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Timmy, good to see you again. There's a few things I want to dive into. We thought about you yesterday when we saw the possibility of a 6-inning rule for starting pitchers, and baseball's floating it out there. I always get nervous when they float something out there that it feels like it's a little further down the line. How do you enforce a 6-inning rule for starting pitchers?
Well, I'm not sure how you do that. And Larry Bird was an unbelievably skilled player. You've got to be kidding me. Never seen a guy pass in the half court better than him. One of the greatest shooters of all time. Please. Okay. I don't know how we're going to do this, Dan. This is not going to work at 6 innings. It's going to tie the hands of the managers even more so than they are now. But Dan, we have to bring back the value of the starting pitcher in today's game. Look, I'm a tired old little man now, but when I grew up, Jim Palmer faced Sandy Koufax in the World Series, and Bob Gibson faced Jim Lonborg in Game 7, and he faced Denny McLain in Game 1 the next year. That's what baseball was about. And not only did they start against each other, most of the time they went 9 innings, both of them. We have to get back to something close to that. I don't know how to do it. But Max Scherzer got me in a headlock last year at the postseason and said, you guys, meaning the writers, have to do something about this. We have to come up with a better way to bring back the value of the starting pitcher. And he kind of hooked it to the designated hitter. If you take your starter out after 1 inning, you lose the DH for the rest of the game. That is a possibility, but I just don't see how everyone has to go 6 innings unless you've thrown 100 pitches, or of course, unless you got hurt, or if you gave up 4 earned runs. This is something they're knocking around. I just don't know how you implement it.
Shohei Ohtani not pitching this year, but I'm assuming he will be able to next year. But here he is cruising to 40-40. The possibility that he could go 50-50? I mean, that's uncharted territory here.
And everything is uncharted territory when it comes to this guy. He is the most remarkable player we've ever seen. I got asked about 2 weeks ago if I thought he would get to 40-40. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a trick question. Of course he's going to get to 40-40. And yes, he's got a shot to get to 50-50. And I know he's not pitching anymore. I know he doesn't play the field, but it is difficult, Dan. You know this, to just be a designated hitter. You're not playing in the field, you're not pitching, and yet he hasn't lost a beat. Not only has he not lost a beat, he's hit even better than he has in the past, and that is really, really saying something.
But you look at these guys, there's some cloud of suspicion with some of the 40-40 guys, that those numbers are tainted. Bonds, A-Rod. Well, is Bonds, it's his tainted when he went 40-40?
No, he did that, I believe, before he became the greatest slugger that we've ever seen. So
Okay.
I think he had already done that. He had already done a lot of things before the problems, or whatever we call it, began. I don't even know what
uh,
to call it anymore, Dan.
and it feels like, and I know that there's so much pressure on the Hall of Fame, you being a Hall of Famer, voting on this. The Pete Rose documentary that came out, there's the groundswell once again that Pete deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. It is a museum. There's a lot of things in museums that are done by bad people, or there's not necessarily a representation of the best of all of us. But can we compromise and have people in the Hall of Fame and tell the story of baseball through the Hall of Fame, even though there's going to be some warts and all?
Well, as you know, Dan, there are a bunch of people in the Hall of Fame who have plenty of warts right now. And you're right. That's the only way to do this, is to attach a story to every person so we know exactly what happened. Is it a museum, or is it just a place for the greatest players of all time? If you're writing a story about Cooperstown and the Hall of Fame. Well, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens have to be in it. But I totally understand the other side of this that people say, no, you can't put people in who, cheated on any level. And yet guys have been cheating in baseball for 140 years. Dan, you know this. You played. You are encouraged to cheat. I remember Jeter got hit on the knob of his bat once, and he pretended like it hit him on the hand because he was behind in the count, and he ended up at first base. That's what you're taught. That's what I was taught in high school to do. And then when somebody does it, you go, oh my gosh, he tried to deceive the umpire. Well, they've been deceiving the umpire and the referees in the NBA for years. This is part of the gig. It's not doesn't make it right, but you can't ignore it.
Is Pete getting in posthumously? Could you see like a sympathetic type vote for Pete after the fact?
Yeah, I just refuse to believe that he will never get into the Hall of Fame. But it's going to take a different commissioner, in my opinion, who's going to have to come in and open it up again and see where it goes from there. Because I don't think Rob Manfred is going to allow this to happen. It's a really tricky spot. And Dan, I make speeches all the time, and like within the first 5 questions, no matter where I am, no matter what the group is, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame question? It happens every single time. That's how interested people still are in this topic.
Talking to Tim Kurkjian, ESPN analyst, National Baseball Hall of Fame sports writer. He's at the Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Let me go back to Ohtani. He had a procedure. Now, I don't know if we're going to make Tommy John, the name, obsolete. Are we coming up with a different type of surgery that it'll be called something different than Tommy John surgery, and therefore Tommy becomes obsolete?
Well, I'm certainly hope so, because Tommy John was a really, really good major league pitcher, won over 280 games, should not have an injury attached to his name. But this is the 50-year anniversary of Tommy John surgery. And Dan, somebody asked me once, like, whose name comes up more in regular conversation in baseball, Cy Young or Tommy John? And I think the answer is Tommy John. And there's something wrong with that. So let's hope they can, and they know how to do this really well. And they're going to keep doing it better and better. And maybe instead of being out a year, they're only going to be out 6 months. But I would really like to see fewer pitchers get hurt and fewer discussions of all of this. But I just don't see that happening anytime soon.
But it's like Kevin Durant and Aaron Rodgers with Achilles surgery, that, modern medicine procedures, that now you have different doctors who are doing different things to get players back sooner. And that's what I wondered, that we just throw out Tommy John. Oh, Tommy John surgery. Ohtani didn't have Tommy John surgery, but he had a procedure. I don't know if that was something that can circumvent Tommy John surgery. So, but I do like that we mention Tommy and continue to mention him, and then maybe people will look at his career record. And, I mean, it's hard to win 280 games, and you're not in the Hall of Fame. Right. But can he be in there for contributions to the game?
Well,
with Tommy John surgery.
His name comes up every day. He should be in there for this. A guy asked him once, does losing, really burn your stomach? And he said, the only thing that burns my stomach is Szechuan food. And I said, all right, that's good enough for me.
I think, when he passes away, he just donates his arm to the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, I think for his sake, someday we're going to rename this disease, this surgery, and so it's going to be named after someone else, or it's just going to be given a different name. At least I hope so.
I'm listening to the Mets game, and you had Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling, and they're both going on a 3-0 count. No, you don't swing on a 3-0 count. You're not swinging on a 3-0 count. Well, the hitter swung on a 3-0 count and hit a home run. I don't know what is analytics. I don't know what is new baseball, because back in the 70s or 80s when we were growing up, you're not swinging on a 3-0 pitch. Is it okay to swing on a 3-0 pitch in today's game?
Dan, I'm at the Little League World Series, and a kid swung at a 3-0 pitch yesterday. And We laughed out loud. It was wonderful in the press box. Me, Ravi, Eduardo Perez, 3-0 pitch. It was out of the strike zone and he swung at it. Yes, Dan, you're allowed to swing at a 3-0 pitch. Mike Trout, a couple years ago, hit the first home run of his career on a 3-0 pitch. So he usually doesn't. The rule, the unwritten rule about 3-0 count is you never swing 3-0 when you're up by 10 runs, which, of course,
Okay.
Fernando Tatis Jr. did a few years ago and then celebrated on his way around the bases. And a couple of veterans on his team said, "Come over here. We need to talk to you about this." Because I don't think he understood that that is really forbidden because somebody's going to get thrown out after that. Somebody on your team is going to get hurt because you swung at a 3-0 pitch. Just look at the scoreboard, read the room, and you'll know what to do.
Have you noticed a change in coaching style at the Little League World Series? We were talking about growing up, tough love. Now you have coaches who are more, it came up with Tua Tagovailoa with Mike McDaniel as opposed to Brian Flores. Flores used to demean him and, really rough him up, and then Mike McDaniel came in and was basically an arm around your shoulder. Looking at, these coaches, and many of them have kids on the team, has it changed at all, kind of the tone of how they coach?
Yeah, I think so. And so has being mic'd up during the game. Look, the Little League World Series is so beautifully run, Dan. Nobody makes a mistake here. And if a manager goes out there and says something even mildly inappropriate, it's just not going to work. And they're going to tell him, you can go home now. If he's mic'd up and says something that he shouldn't have said. But Dan, it's a way bigger thing, as you know, than just Little League. We don't yell at anyone in the big leagues anymore. A few years ago, a guy made a horrendous base running mistake. If I had made that at age 15, my high school coach would have taken me off the field and said, "You're not playing the rest of this game if you don't know any better than that." But this guy it's a major leaguer, makes a terrible mistake. He gets called into the manager's office after the game. The manager puts his arm around him and says, "We love you, okay? Just remember, we love you." And then he explained, "You can't make this mistake again. This is what you do the next time." 3 times he was told, "We love you. Don't forget that." Whereas back when I first started covering, if you made that mistake, Dick Williams, Jim Fregosi, Whitey
Oh,
Herzog,
boy.
Earl Weaver would have crushed your bones. They're right on the field. Those days don't exist anymore.
Always great to talk to you, Tim. Thank you. Have fun there in Williamsport.
It's impossible not to have fun here, Dan. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
That's Tim Kurkjian. And you can see Tim on ESPN's coverage, Little League World Series, all this week from Williamsport, Pennsylvania.